Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Miller here at Never Not Here, and we're really into dialoguing, and we're into our link. We have this link created, an open link that really goes anywhere in the world, as long as there's broadband internet, and we just want to use it and talk to people from all corners of the world, including you. So if you want to talk, we have a special forum for that called Open Mic. I've just been lately into a scholastic atmosphere, and that means a university. And of course, universities operate under credentials. Credentials are kind of like how a human being associates with society, and through a long list of achievements and participations and actual what should I say? I mean, just opportunities to make a difference in society. Then that becomes a long list, which is called a resume. And some people have really been hooked into society for a long time and have a really quite impressive list of many accomplishments. And of course, other people, maybe more like me, sometimes we've stood back from society. Sometimes we've shifted from one thing to another. But so like our list jumps around. And for a long time at Never Not Here, I've just never really wanted to introduce people in a way that says, oh, this person did this person did that. And saying that, are there really any experts at life? Because we're talking about how you could live your own life. And what's the grace of that? And the grace meaning like, are you graceful at it? Are you able to move from one situation to another without getting off center? And I believe that's kind of like what we're talking about, because we're not trying to aim anybody toward any kind of particular life. We're just trying to say whatever your life is, if you have a destiny or whatever, if you live it with centeredness and grace, you get the maximum out of it, whatever that means also, it just means like you'll get a lot of joy. And So excuse me for not introducing people in a more scholastic way, but just to go for, just to move into our conversations, please help me welcome Bentinho Massaro. So welcome.
Hello, thank you, Richard.
Basically, I'm trying to say that here we're just talking about what makes life easy, I think. I don't know, is that what we're doing?
Yes, I'm pretty good.
And somehow you've had a calling to talk about that.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. Sometimes people ask like, so why talk about it, or why share about it? And it's a bit like, well, why did you get up out of bed this morning? Did you really, I'm getting out of bed this morning and I'm doing this because of this. You just got up out of bed. I'm not sure how I ended up here talking to you. It's a moment to moment thing, and it's a natural flow. So it's not so much like, I want to speak about this, or I have to speak about this. I do feel great compassion for people in general, and the spiritual seeking world, because that's where I came from. So I do feel an empathy to cut that suffering short, that seeking short, and to make life just much more easeful. So I don't know, calling, no calling, I'm not sure. It's just
Right. I mean, I sure feel the same. I don't really have an objective to cut seeking short, but I just want to make it a pleasure, you know. And if it's frustrating and kind of like nerve wracking and saying, "Oh, I'm going in circles," well, I'm back here again, or something that you know, if you think there's supposed to be some progress or something, then of course I mean, maybe it's just because you had a hint that it's supposed to change and things are going to be different. And, you know, I mean, I guess the only problem in the world is expectations, right? I mean, because if we didn't have any expectations, we would be comfortable wherever we were. And that's really a synthesis. Get it down to, well, one word or...
Yeah, beautiful.
So then we believe we have the right to have expectations. You know, well, we live in a society and everyone around us lives in a house. Okay, so then we better live in a house too. Or, you know, whatever. Or the laws are that way. You can't even send your kids to school if you're a gypsy because you have to have an address. And at least around here, you can't not have an address and join a school system because supposedly you're paying taxes to support that school system either through your ownership of the house or through your rental of the house. And so then I don't think there's any gypsy schools in the U.S. Nomadic schools, let's say. So there's certain expectations. And then we have to kind of sort those out and say, well, you know, okay, we can live in expectations, but I mean, let's not make them a huge suffering either.
Right. So where does expectation come from? Why does it feel so like this is our right to expect so much from life? And how to, well, it's not, in my perspective, it's not necessarily about stopping the expectations that arise, but it's more like the active participation in expecting something, like total involvement in it or identification. So expectations are like just any other thought, basically, any other pattern, any other form of conditioning. So it can arise. There's no pain in there. So an expectation arises, or a whole set of expectations arise, based on societal conditioning or whatever it might be.
Definitely, that's the conditioning, right? This whole series of expectations is the conditioning pattern.
Definitely. And the more you get used to this natural ease, the more there's also a clarity about everything that arises, including your own ideas and concepts and expectations. And what I've really found for myself is that society, almost society itself, is one big. It's so ingrained into this conditioning in everybody. You start to see it in everyone, especially in yourself, that you have no idea how much of your daily activities, and then especially your thoughts, ideas, and actions, how much they're based on where did you ever pick them up? Like, where did you ever pick that expectation or idea up? None of it is really essentially originally you or arose in you. As such a major part is society. So there's like this sense of society constantly dictating our actions and our sense of guilt or judgment or what we have to be. And at first, this might not be so apparent, but when that clarity kicks in, then it's like, Jesus.
Yeah. You know, that's very interesting because, you know, you could say like, okay, a certain percentage of our time and our life is actually dedicated, knowing or unknowing, to developing societal norms because we live it out. We live out society. And then a certain part may be allowed to be our individual. A certain part of our time and our life force is given to human sexuality, where we're always after the other sex, and maybe we try to prolong that and say we're still virile at an older age, and say that that's really important to act that out. So then a lot of our time is given to that. So then sexuality is just a species. A society is like The nature and the nurture are those two. And then the human being, maybe we have to strike out on our own and be an individual, even to find our unity. Sometimes they say you have to be lost in order to be found. And so then that percentage is a third percentage. It could be a very small percentage because most of us are all wrapped up in ironing out society and proclaiming our sexuality.
Yeah, definitely.
That's an amazing thing to say, isn't it? Because you can just start to see, well, how do I divide my time, and why I'm not even me? I'm just society, just acting out.
Yes. And then often there's this urge to go a completely different direction, which can serve its purpose, of course. But then it's like, oh, I have to break free from society into the wild, that kind of thing. I speak of my own experience as well. I had the strong desire to escape society when I was, 17, 18. I just stood by the side of my parents' bed and said something like, I just want to leave to India tomorrow, or I don't care, I just want to leave here. All these distractions, I can't focus on who I am and all of that. So then often we have this other extreme to break free from the first extreme, after which a balance naturally emerges. So basically, when we realize that right now, what you just said, when we realize that every bit of thought comes from societal conditioning, basically, and that there's never really been an original thought in us, then there's also no need necessarily. If you feel the need, of course, you can act it out. But there's a great freedom already in recognizing that all your thoughts and emotions aren't necessarily as personal to you as you might have believed them to be. So there's a natural piece already if you recognize, and if you become okay with that there is no there's not really a personal identity here in the ultimate sense of the word, that there is a me and this is my thought and this is my emotion.
That's terrific because it's a huge economy of energy if you don't have to defend all those thoughts.
Definitely. Complete vulnerability. A bit scary at first.
Well, when you said when you're recognizing that there's so much of it is societal in content, then, you could take it lighter. It doesn't even get scary.
Definitely. Well, to some it might feel scary.
Some, sure.
So if this openness is there, it's like at first you're completely focused into one perspective, you're acting that out, some totally unconscious action, so to speak. And then you realize that all of these perspectives and all of these expressions of everyday living, when you realize that they are very much based in expectations from other people, that you actually view yourself through the judgment you believe that other people have of you. So whatever you do, there's a constant judgment of yourself, but you've never actually been a judge. Originally, you're innocent. So where's that judge coming from? What's the point of view from which to judge? That is, in most cases, society. Like, how would my parents think about this? How would society in general feel about this? So there's a societal mind arising, societal thoughts arising, which basically form our self-judgment. Because if we would be the only ones on this planet, I doubt there would be self-judgment.
That's a very interesting perspective, because maybe I always looked at it the other way, that because we judge ourselves, we judge society. Well, okay, that's true. Because we judge ourselves, we judge society. But you're saying that that's because we think society is judging us, or know it.
Yeah, we think through the lens of society. It's like we walk in a circle to face ourselves, and we view ourselves from the perspective of the other, as if the other is looking at us, if the other is judging our experiences. At least that's my experience. that most, if not all, of my self-judgment, whenever that arises, it is based on what I want. I want to conform to a society. But what is society but my own thoughts about it? And they in turn are formulated by my upbringing, by my conditioning. So whenever there is a self-judgment, it's not original. I wasn't born judging myself. It's because right and wrong is taught, and it's societal thinking that we believe we have to conform to and live up to. And that becomes a conditioned, ingrained almost way of perpetually judging our own thoughts, emotions, actions. It's by the standard of society that we judge ourselves. Like if I would walk around in the Garden of Eden, with just Eve next to me, maybe not even Eve, just me, Adam, then who would be there to judge me? I would never have thought of judging myself. Nobody would have ever taught me to judge what I was doing. I would no judgment. I'd just go about my day and enjoy as much as I could. No repression anywhere. Therefore, no need to kill unnecessarily, or no need to break free from what I repress in myself through the standard of societal thinking. So then there's just, I don't know judgment. What would it be like to not know judgment, not to know what it is, the very phenomena itself? I think originally, in this sense, we are innocent. And there's no actual, the essence of what I am is never judging myself or its actions.
That's quite a picture you paint. At a time when we don't even know what judgment is, how did it happen?
Yeah. How did it happen? With the thought of another. That's where it originates. Like, there's a me, so there's a you. You are over there, you're judging me, or we have to relate in some way. It's a bit of a contrived thought. Because the other, existentially, is not there when I don't think the word other, when I don't think in terms of you and me, or you versus me. So once the thought arises that there's another that I have to live up to, or that somehow relates to who I am, then there's the societal thinking, there's the creation of societal thinking and judgment and expectation.
So kind of what it gets down to is, as a human, or the human society, or human mental perception, we build abstract structures and then we live in them. So then they're made out of also preconception, but also expectation. They're built out of mental images that are up to a point agreed upon. And I guess we're saying they should be agreed upon more. In other words, you should take my image and agree on it. And you're saying, no, you should agree on my image. And then that's the kind of the cause of all conflict, right? We're trying to indoctrinate each other to follow these images, and then it's a grand game, and I don't see that it's going to stop in any near future. And it kind of sounds like, when some people speak in spiritual terms, that it's not necessary, that this game could halt and we could all be in pure space, or whatever. And some people go to that, actually, or kind of believe that might be ideal, or that's the better way. But I think that's just another mental image of a better way, and so then that's not really any different.
Very good.
And I don't know, for some reason I'm always trying to say, well, yes, we can embrace this whole, and even with all the conflicts built in it, but somehow let's not get stuck in any kind of like, in personalization, like you were saying. And let's not get stuck in playing a real hard game, let's play one where you don't have to let blood and stuff like that. And maybe that will be more joyful and will really, feel more complete. So I'm not really against the game, because, how could you be? But I want to be real clear about that, where I think other teachings sometimes confuse people, and at least it seems to me that people walk away thinking that, no, the game's no good, and it's not real. They say that, something like that, and that's enough to get you going and saying, no, we have to discard something.
Yeah, like a spiritual cop-out. Definitely. There's no, but that's why it's important, I think, not to focus on the contents of our being so much. So that's what we've always learned to do, right? We focus in on a thought, on an emotion, on a feeling, on an expectation, on a game we play, on society itself, on you and me, on whatever it is that arises as our current experience. Immediately there's a focusing in, there's a tunneling down into. And the problem with many, with many teachings, so to speak, or the problem that you address in them, is that they focus on the problem, on the concept, on the content that arises as the experience, and then from there they're trying to solve it, they're trying to escape it, or they say we should, alter the contents to fit a more spiritually perfect image, or whatever it might be. But rather than that, I think it's important to emphasize more what we have in common. And I don't mean necessarily on the level of like, you have a body, I have a body. That's already a very fine generalization and a very fine equalization to make us equal, to make us see beyond the game for a minute. But really beyond that, what's always already present, as regardless of what experience arises, what is always already present. Then for that moment, you're out of the game. Well, out of is not an accurate term, but you're out of the game of being involved and judging the individual appearances that arise, the individual parts of your experience. So when you recognize this basic ground of being, the simple fact that you are, that you experience, rather than what you experience, then the game itself is no longer the issue. As you say, there's no need to escape the game. There's nothing inherently wrong with the game. It's just based on misperception, constant misperception and insecurity. Therefore, having to live up to your expectation of me, etc., repression, overindulgence, all of that. But when there is a recognition taking place here of what's much more basic, what's much more present, or always the case, rather than focusing in on any thought, emotion, feeling, or other appearance, then there is a natural peace, then there is a natural relaxation happening, including the relaxation of these perpetual societal expectations, or that inbuilt part of conditioning, which is totally fine. That's seen when we're relaxed with our own thoughts and emotions. It's seen that it's no problem. But when we're honed in on them, when we're zoomed in, so to speak, then we got these blinkers on, and that's all we know. And then that creates our psychological suffering. And so we try to escape it, obviously. But then if a teaching like this, if a teaching to really make life easier, if it's still about rearranging all the contents of awareness, then it's never going to succeed. It's failed to begin with because it will never work. So it's not about, it's about trusting more, relaxing back into what's natural.
So relaxing back into what's already always here. And then when you do that, actually you realize that the game is playing itself, that you, either with or without you, you're an actor in it too, it appears. You have your part. And then there's, but you also have this huge trust that my part is just doing it. It's just, you realize that your part is effortless. Number one, and number two, that it's way bigger than you ever dreamed it was. You dreamed it as a small part, and it's getting bigger and bigger every day. And that is a wonderful let go.
Yeah, it is. Makes life easy. Well, simple. Not always easy, but simple. So it's also about, if we truly wish to reach out to society, if we truly wish to contribute naturally, effortlessly, but beneficially, then what you just mentioned, you used the words like your world becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, in a sense. So yeah, let's say your world opens up more. It's seen beyond the boundaries of, I have to secure my little world, and I have to conform to the expectations of others, and then I'm living my life happily, So when that dissolves, true relaxing back into, true taking that step where we release our focus from individual parts and we just rest as the openness that's here, perceiving right now, effortlessly knowing that I'm in front of a laptop without my need to think about it. That which knows that the body is here as it is. That which sees everything is always already present. And any idea that arises is not always already present. That's very clear. It's very obvious. So where do you want your allegiance to be? Do we want it to be in that which is ever accessible, available, always present? Or do we want to base our lives on individual parts that come and go? And obviously there's a lot of stress involved to keep some parts and to get rid of the other parts, because these give us pleasure and these give us pain. So we need to avoid the painful ones, and we need to set everything in place so that we can secure the positive ones, the pleasant ones. And that actually, so it's the attachment to that creates the suffering. It's not the painful experiences that create suffering. But that's not seen, that's not experientially felt, that relief is not felt, as long as we don't rest back into this, as long as we don't relax as that openness. Because only when we do that is there no individual focus on anything for a moment. And then there's a natural noticing of what is always already present. Not as anything in particular, but more like, especially initially, like a spaciousness in which everything comes and goes, like a spacious awareness. So there's no individual focus anywhere. There's no tunneling down. There's no saying, I am this, so I'm not that. There's no, I prefer this over that. And even if the preference arises, that's okay. But we don't focus on the preference. We don't get caught up completely in that preference. We just relax back into the openness. And we allow it to come and go as it pleases. All the shapes, forms, sizes, experiences, appearances. We let them come and go as they are. And if we for a moment don't focus on them as if our identity is contained within them somewhere, needing to be preserved, improved, or perfected, then what we notice in that natural relaxation of allowing even our painful states to come and go is this that there's no need to defend anything. We are perfectly fine, and the whole game as it arises becomes more transparent. And when it's transparent, what can shine through is the beauty of it all. But it's not going to be realized as transparent as long as there is focus on any one of them, as if there's any sort of identity or me contained within that to reach or to improve. So there's a natural openness, and all comes and goes. That has already always been the case. It's just that we're catching up on what we've missed. It's always already been the case. So even the involvement in any particular individual entity or idea or expectation, even that process too was itself appearing within that which already sees this moment. And that which sees that you're totally identified is itself not at all identified or non-identified. It simply is as it is. It's seeing this moment, it's fueling this moment, it's forming, it's shaping as your current experience.
Let me try to say it in a different way, because I mean, I know we've heard words like identified. I have for a long time, and I was always trying to figure out what identified means. At first I thought it meant that I think that thought is me. Then I thought that identified means that I think those thoughts are true. So then I believe that's how the world works, and that is a reflection of of some outside world that has a certain characteristic. And so then I really believe that, and somehow I have to move within that space, which in a way is another way of identified. But now let me just say it in another way that's really, really simple, because we were talking about bearing down or boring in on focusing in on certain conceptual perceptions. And so then life unfolds in a certain way. There's a lot of activity, and let's say we're in a very narrow space because we're very bored in, we're very focused down on it. And in a way, we run with every movement, because there's not a lot of room to stand back because the focus is narrow. And so then whatever's there and whatever we think is us, I mean, we're running with every movement, and it's tiring. And that's what people say when they say, hey, my plate's full. It means like I can't eat anymore, I can't digest anymore, I can't do anymore. My workload is very heavy, and I'm running with every action. And then there's something called, let's just say delegation. I don't know. Some CEOs, if they're really bored down, they sign everything, right? And you pass it through me. It's like a little funnel where everything goes through and really slow. Everyone's in the line outside their door trying to get signed off. And but we're saying that then there's a greater space, and there's something that's always already here, which is like our awareness, or we don't even need a word to it. It's just somehow a peacefulness, or like it's an okayness. And how come it's okay? Well, it's because it's a bigger space, and you can see those small activities, but you don't have to run with everyone. You're not really running with every activity because they're there, and there's space for you to be kind of watching them, And then that's what I was saying. You realize, at least I realized, that there's nothing I have to do. I mean, I don't have to do anything to do this so-called interview. I come here totally at peace because I know it's just going to roll out. It's going to happen between you and me. And if I have to go somewhere and give a speech, I'm not worried about I have to give a speech. I just stand at the podium and pull the microphone closed and go, duh, and the space comes there. Maybe I'll just start saying 2 words, and I don't know where those 2 words are going to go at all. And somehow I've realized in that big space of that, what you said, something that's already always present, that I'm actually so far away from those individual doings that it can't be me doing it. And that also that it can't be me because, like I said, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and I'm not prepared to do all those big things as far as me running the show. I don't know how I can get involved in that, I maybe have tried for decades to do something like that, and now it's just happening in a way by itself, and I could call it grace, and I could just call it. But in a way, I'm calling it by stepping back, and then others will put words on it and say, well, you're not the doer, and then when you discover you're not the doer and all that. But that's such a confusing I mean, just to say there's space to realize that this thing is unfolding, right? This whole
Right.
uh, this whole game is even unfolding, with me running with it or with me without me running with it, But I'm in motion with it, sure. But it's effortless, and when you get that effortless spot, then peace is what's there, and it's kind of like it supports itself, because then you can really start to back off and let it happen, and then all the pluses and minuses don't really make that much difference, like the desires and the fears. What I'm running away from, running toward to, they seem less and less defined, maybe. I mean, they're there, but they're not so. It's just kind of like automatic to me. I mean, I don't really have to concern myself with any of that.
Yeah. Yet there is no rejection or apathy per se, like, right? Or how would you experience that?
No, I don't see any rejection, right? I mean, let's see what could happen, like that I would reject. There's some things I reject, I mean, but I don't really take it too seriously, like I hate my computers to crash down and stuff like that and start them over again. And I hate to not save my work and have to redo a couple hours worth, but sometimes I forget to save, and usually my computers are pretty darn good, so then I forget to save even more and more because I don't need to.
Right.
Things like that in the old days might get you, but what else would get me? The only thing that gets everybody really is a sense of justice and injustice. That's a huge whopping deal,
Right.
because when you see something
Mm-hmm.
that seems like it's totally unjust, and then you hear stories of, agrarian societies where everyone's displaced and put into a village. Somehow, Chiquita Banana took the land or something, or bought it for a nickel. And, now all these Central Americans live in a city, and they need money. And, so they sell soda pop, what they never even knew how to drink before. And they got diabetes because they're giving soda pop to everyone, or, whatever they're trying to sell. Somehow there's a degradation going on. And I don't know how you can explain the injustices, You can start to look for the culprit. But this is bearing down on it, focusing down. And then you can start to see all the degradation. You could just say people have to get lost before they can be found, maybe. I don't know. These
Right.
things bug you, but I mean, somehow I try not to really focus on conspiracy theories and all this kind of and all the political maelstroms that are happening in our world, those can bug me. But I mean, if I let them, because it just takes you with the energy. It's almost like sexuality. When you see some sexy pictures, it takes you, and just
Mm-hmm.
because the energy can just take you, and somehow, I
Right.
don't know how whether I'm not saying you should defend yourself from that, but somehow you can see that you've been there already, or that's a good story, but it was good a long time ago. You don't need to go there now. Or, just, it's because you're honoring this something that's always already present, and you're honoring that more than even an energy rush. So there's
Right.
the justice energy, and there's the sexuality energy, and there's I don't know, there's the argumentation energy. There's all these energies that are out there, but you don't have to follow each and every one. Isn't it something
Yeah.
how we're so tempted, like once an idea hits, and if we do bear down on it, it's going to generate another idea for sure. And then we go on a
Yeah.
chain, and we are on this little chain, and one idea pops another, and somehow we're believing that this at the end of the trail, this is going to be very instructive. This is going to really help my life, and we're
Mm.
just totally absent, from what's already always present. We're just totally forgetting about it.
Right. So, and that's actually a metaphor I often use. It's a bit like a chain or like a necklace. And if you stories, I mean, like a story or a sudden compelling energy that totally takes you, or just your everyday life, whatever it might be. Maybe you're very caught up in thinking about things. So whenever there's a story, it's like a chain, and it only seems effective, real, and compelling because it is a chain, because it is a necklace. Only a full necklace makes sense. So the practical approach right there is to stop for one moment and to just cut through that chain by recognizing what is always already here. And if you do that even for a split second, in the very act, in the very midst of your chain working itself out, playing itself out, in that very compelling energy of justice, injustice, you just go like idea after idea, or I need to do this, etc. And you just stop for one moment and you recognize what is here. You recognize that there is something that's seeing this, that there is a natural presence here. And then again, the story will compellingly come up. But if you do that a couple of times, you break the necklace. And, it only takes one good cut to make the necklace seem useless. And so the story crumbles all by itself. If even for a moment you cut it, you just stop it, and you recognize what always already is. So then it falls apart on its own.
Stories are so interesting, because stories, for some time I've been just saying that what we react to in life, I think always, but, I don't have to say that, is a story. I mean, our interpretation is what we react to. Because, how could this same event create so many different feelings in so many different people? Everyone has their own. And so really the event itself is almost inert without an interpretation that goes with it. And that's where all the emotional content is stored, in that interpretation. And so then when you realize that, you realize that it's not so fixed, like, oh, this really did happen, and we all felt bad. You kind of realize that, an image came up. I had an interpretation based on my interpretation of yesterday. It's slightly different, It's a chain called conditioning. And it comes from my parents' interpretations and my teachers' interpretations and my society's interpretations. And it makes you feel good or it makes you feel bad, in these different cases. And then it could be different because I could just interpret it different. And that could be like an exercise in a way, not really to get the correct interpretation or a better interpretation, but somehow just to realize that, hey, these interpretations are almost totally arbitrary. And don't get stuck in one like a blind alley, Keep moving. Pick an interpretation which allows you to go forward and stay centered. And centered means have at least part of your focus on what's always here. Stories, one story leads to another. And then sometimes a story can actually kind of break stories, which is really, a stuck story can actually be broken by another story. Like you say, break the necklace. Kind of like it's another part of the game, right?
And more effectively than using another story to fight the prior the story prior to that, is in that moment, for example, when we actually recognize what is always already here, there is no engagement in any story. So it's not like, we grab one stick to beat the other stick with or whatever. It's like we be stickless. We just drop the stick for a moment and we see we don't have to carry that stick around. That's confirmed to us. It's almost like we recognize it's recognized that something is here beyond the extent, beyond the control of thought. Something is naturally present and unaffected. And in turn, that recognition confirms deeply and gradually transforms our mind and heart, so to speak. It confirms that we don't need the story. So the story crumbles, or at least the energy to it crumbles. And it's like a wheel that plays itself out, even after you stop fueling it,
Yeah, the interest in it crumbles. We're not so interested. They can come or they can go, but we're not so fascinated anymore.
Right. Precisely.
I don't know if you noticed, but I can jump into a story and then be lost and then come out pretty quick. I'm not lost enough that I'm really lost, but I know I know where the resting is, somehow, and then I can. Even now, I'm noticing that when I start to tell a story, and then I say, "I'm really getting into this one." I'm almost believing it, but a little bit behind, a little bit of as a hindsight, like say, "Oh, there, I was just kind of really going." Even right in front of you here, I'm doing it. But I mean, I somehow it's pretty easy for me to come back to what I just call it centered for now.
Right. Well, it's a beautiful word. Even though ultimately there's no center and periphery, of course, but the word centeredness is very, powerful. I've used it a lot previously. And also, like when you are, when we are caught up in the story, it's a bit like the ocean forming as a wave, but in the wave, the wave exists of nothing other than water. And the story exists only due to, within, and is known by that which sees, with it, which is always already present. So in the face of our story, often there's the more we recognize this, the more we cut these necklaces short, or our interest in these stories, and the more we confirm to ourselves that something is effortlessly, always, already present, no matter what comes and goes, no matter how much we're identified with it or detached or whatever. What happens is that we start to realize, or we start to recognize, first as a bit of like a background sense, like there's always some sort of awareness. Like you say, I noticed that there is a story, like I'm really getting into this one, but you only know that because there is the natural cognizance, which is always already here. No matter how much stories are identified with or are engaged in. So the very wave, forming yourself as the very wave in the ocean, doesn't mean that the water is not there. So you can recognize the water while feeling like you are the wave. You're completely embodied as the story. But the story right there is seen, and not from a distance, or that might be the initial sense, like I'm an observer from here and this is happening over there. But more and more, it's really like the wave is totally pervaded by the water. So we recognize the wetness, we recognize the water rather than the shape of the wave. You can either focus on the shape of the wave, or you can focus, which is not really a focus, but you can relax into recognizing that it is water. And then for that moment, you don't recognize the shape. So you see the unity, so to speak. You see that basic ground. And that's what I meant in the beginning of this interview. Our common ground, our mutual experience, shines through the shape of the wave. Like if you're looking in a window from a shop's gallery or something like that, you can either look at the jewelry behind the window, or you can see your own reflection in the window, because it's like a transparent mirror as well. So what we focus upon dictates our experience of it. And if we focus on our own reflection there, then we won't see the jewelry. And if we focus on the jewelry, then we won't see our own reflection. And so in every moment, there's either two things to recognize or be engaged in, so to speak. One is the individual form, the judgment, the story about it, the emotion, really getting into it again and again and again. Or we can recognize that something allows the experience to be experienced in the first place. Due to natural presence, due to natural alertness, that which sees you and me right now. Due to that, there is the story. Without that, there would be no story. So we recognize the ground of the experience. We recognize the wetness of the wave rather than being totally focused on its shape. And so then the shape becomes transparent to our experience. So the emotions, the thoughts, the stories, they become more and more transparent to this natural presence until it's recognized continuously. But not by, I need to recognize it. But it's just, you've totally confirmed to yourself in direct experience again and again that it is always already here. It's not only already here, it is always here. And when we recognize that, not always, but for a moment, that it is always here, that whatever comes up next, whether we recognize awareness or not, that awareness is there too, totally indivisible from the experiencing of the experience, then it shines through every experience. So the story might be very dense, and you might be, some trauma arises because some circumstantial event triggers it, and there's this insanely depressive story or this insanely anxious story, and you're totally caught up in it, emotions, people, all kinds of projections flow from you. And at the same time, it's a total confirmation of awareness, because the experience would not be there without awareness. So it's that one shift of recognizing the other side of the coin, or rather recognizing that, it's not head or tails, it is the coin. So you recognize the essence of it, which is awareness, not as a distant observer, but as just being there in the experience, as the experience. You recognize the
I
wetness.
suppose it can happen that when that recognition becomes more dominant. I suppose dominant just means in a time or something. I mean, so I don't know. That's kind of like a judgment that comes afterwards. But when that when that awareness is there, maybe even the story will dissolve. You'll say, well, really, that it'll lose its yen to tell the finish of the tale. Maybe it'll just say, oh yeah, okay. Maybe even the story will just flop on its side and just go, oh.
Yeah, it's a bit like you realize there never really was a story. Because it's not that the story too has to go, as if it's a little piece of imperfection left, just the story arises, but even that might drop. Yeah, that's true, it might drop. But rather than it dropping, it's not necessarily that it drops, but it's just that which is naturally rested into becomes so much more obvious that the shape of the wave is no longer noticed. And so it's hard to say if there really was a story.
So it drops. That's the way it drops. It just...
Yeah,
but I mean,
right.
it's that the story is, in a way, dependent on the teller of the story, right? Like, as long as I'm so interested in telling that story, okay, that story takes power. But when I lose interest in it, there's no teller. Nobody's going to tell that story anymore. Then it's gone. Yes. And it never happened, and it never was there, And in that sense, every story is there. As soon as I'm interested in telling one, boom, it's up. And it's going, And so then every possible story, I mean, even in a day-to-day experience of walking down the street, I could tell a million stories, and I only tell a couple. And maybe I don't have to tell any. And so then you could say nothing ever happened, and everything is right there, ready to be told. Every story is there to be told. It's kind of like evidence of the arbitrariness of the whole thing, that it just, you can have anything you want. Just start telling a story.
Yeah. It's like you don't notice the wire around your microphone right now because it has no meaning to you. You notice whatever you are saying right now or whatever I'm saying right now because there is a slight focusing in on that, which is fine. It's not like that's unenlightenment or something like that. But just to indicate this, you're consciously aware to this, you're consciously present to this because it means something to you. Maybe not ultimately, but because the wire around your microphone, which is within your field of perception, I assume, is not noticed, it's because it has no meaning for you. Like this bottle of water here, it's not noticed.
Right. Yeah. Actually, this room is total chaos. This room has got piles and piles of wires and equipment and everything. I just dump it and leave it in piles. I mean, there's a total chaos here, and I can focus on any of 1,000 things, and I'm only focusing on you, and then once in a while I jump back and say, what am I going to say? Or something like that, But...
So, but the wires do not exist effectively when you're not noticing them, right?
Right.
So when the story becomes totally irrelevant, it's only because we've learned, through societal thinking mostly, that we have to be so focused on our cares, on our sensations, on our thoughts, on our desires. But when that, as you say, when you lose interest in that, you start fueling it, you stop fueling it. And then it also tends to become less, less frequent. However, that's not the importance. The important part is that your interest is not there. So it's your interest, your attention is naturally relaxed in what is always here. And there's no excessive need to focus on anything that appears. There's no need to define it. Oh, this is this. So in a similar way that I don't notice anything in particular when I'm not focused on it, when it has no meaning to me, this bottle of water has no meaning right now to me. So I don't even notice it. All that's apparent as the experience is awareness, but relatively it is speaking to you right now, so to speak. So that's what I focus on. That's what's important right now. So then I don't notice the bottle. And similarly, even with this experience of speaking to you, while I'm speaking to you, it's hardly even noticed in the sense that I'm talking to you, but it's not defined as anything. It's very translucent. It's very, very transparent. So what shines through is my natural peace. Well, not my natural peace, but its natural presence. It shines through and it doesn't make distinction. It doesn't define you versus me. It doesn't even define I am speaking. So because I have no interest in any single definition, because I've realized through recognizing what is always already here, I've realized and confirmed to myself that I really don't need to be engaged in everything like that. That now there is the natural peace of this.
Perhaps, okay, let's try this on. Perhaps you don't need not to either, because let's say you hold a meeting and somebody comes in and they are telling a story, and then they share it with you, and then you're willing to acknowledge that story, or just say, okay, I hear you, but these I don't know. There's some interchange that happens, right? In other words, you let that story in for a second. Your comportment is not denial of the story, but maybe another perspective of it, like you're saying right now. That story is. I mean, what about that? People are talking. A lot of people are telling stories, and most of them, and they're probably acting on those stories. Because they're figuring they're an actor in it. And then maybe that's what's happening in the world, and it's kind of chaotic. So then maybe we could get involved with some of those stories. I don't know. Maybe
Definitely.
not on the level of the story, where we're trying to work it out and solve it, but somehow there's a greater touch point, let's call it. What is that touch point?
So we're naturally, through our own direct commitment to not paying excessive attention to individual parts of our experience anymore, but to just let it naturally be, and just to be natural and open, we start to become more present to what's already present. So that becomes more of a natural thing, just a natural acceptance that there is this ease, which teaches itself to go deeper and deeper and more apparent. And what happens is that engagement is still happening, but like you said, there is full conviction, or ever increasing conviction, not just intellectually, but just being transformed through direct confirmation of awareness being always already present. There is this conviction that it is always already the case, and so there is no excessive interest in any single point of reference or experience. And so whenever something arises in the experience, there is this natural conviction. So we're not excessively focused on what the story is telling us. We're not excessively focused on the shape of the experience. We're just naturally at peace. And that peace shines through. And it develops conventionally. So between you and me, my relationships with other appearances, people, it increases your effectiveness on every level of communication, of sharing, of it's very, very powerful convention in this conventional experiencing. Because there's no need to close down my little world, because there's no little world. So because there is no little world, that is no longer emphasized. There's no interest in that anymore. There's no fear to secure that into a particular form. And so whatever is met in this freshness, in this openness, in this natural conviction. And the more convinced we are experientially, deeply, the more powerful that affects our relationships with what we would call the world, or whatever you experience at any given time, with whomsoever you are, whatever your conversation is. And there's also, you intuit, and this happens naturally, like a natural sense of what's ultimately right to do at any given point. There's natural action being taken that's decisive. And it seemed to be based on a choice, but it's not really a choice like I prefer this over that, because then I can gain this for myself. But it's a choice being made very naturally, and out of this raw conviction, out of this freedom, to not need any point for myself necessarily, but just to be this freedom. There is also a natural right doing, or so it seems. There's a natural wisdom that comes through. There's a natural balance in relation with everything. And my experience is that I can take on every jacket that seems available to me. I can play every role that seems available to me to add to the balance of every present moment. So somebody might ask me a question, for example, if we're talking about this kind of material, like awakening to what is always already present. If one person comes to me with a question, and then the next person follows with the same question, I might give totally different answers depending on what seems to be necessary in the current moment, and that clarity comes very naturally. So it's not like there's stuck answers like that, concepts like this is the truth. But it's like continuously everything you contribute to your experience seemingly adds to balancing things out. That's how I experience it most of the time, especially in relation with people. You just know the ideas that arise there and the ideas that arise over there. Not always specifically like I can read your mind, but there's a crystal clear sense of what's going on, of what's linked more to or what's preferred. And so I might give a totally different answer to person A that I would give to person B, answering the same question, because person A holds on to the left side and this one holds on to the right side. So in order to balance it out, you give a specific answer, and it comes from a natural clarity in order to evoke recognition or evoke greater balance and evoke greater peace. And that's how you go about your days, and that's how you go about doing anything, really. It's like waking up in the morning. Why do you do it? I don't know. It's just to add to the balance of things, because you no longer have to define or secure your own personal little world. And in that sense, your world becomes, well, I wouldn't say bigger ultimately, because that's another concept, like, oh, my world is very big. But you open up to no longer having to defend anything about yourself. And that too can arise, and that too can be taken on as a role occasionally to add to the balance of things. But ultimately you are completely open and vulnerable to whatever feedback or whatever situation may arise, and you just strap on the jacket that that adds to the balance of things. It adds to the greater wisdom of current experience. Without a personal need, like I need to fix this situation or I need to improve the world, it's a natural, raw kind of power to benefit wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And because there is fearlessness for fear as well, so it doesn't mean fear never arises. You know, if a tiger comes running towards me, you know, I have no clue what I will do. But so there's fear arising, but there's no fear for the fear. And maybe the tiger isn't a very practical day-to-day.
No, maybe it's a good one, you know. But I mean, we of course we never meet a tiger, so we don't know what would happen. You know, in one way, I think we wouldn't be afraid at all of a tiger. Mm-hmm. You know, we'd be totally in action. We'd be moving to the best place, higher ground, or wherever we had to be. You know, or if it was a flood or something like that, or a tsunami or whatever. At that moment, probably there's no time or room for fear or need of it. You know, because you're just doing what is really your highest and best good. I've had some experiences like that where I had no fear. And the fear just seems to be like when it's not here, you have the luxury to run a scenario and say, oh, yeah, that's fearful. And I would shake my boots and stuff. But really, when it happens, you're in action. And that's my experience. So fear
never was a story.
Yeah. Fear is only a thing like, what do you call it? It's just like, I don't know what. It's just kind of like...
it's just pure expression.
It's a movie or something, you know, but it's not really in life. You know, when a truck's bearing down on you, you're not afraid. You move it. You know, a lot of times, you know, okay, like it's very simple things. I've been going on a highway in a blizzard and actually done a 360, you know. I wasn't afraid. I was just trying to keep it straight and not go in the deep ditch or off the ravine, sure. But, I mean, there was no room for fear there. And then afterwards, I kept going, and I thought, and that's when fear can hit. Afterwards, say, oh, my God, what happened to me? What almost happened to me? And you're in the story, you know. Right. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's what I noticed whenever something surprisingly jumps into my attention, like, well, I don't know of a specific example, but a person or a loud sound or whatever, or really like a pretty dangerous situation like you just described. I feel like there's this immediate reaction happening, like, but there is no. Prior to this, I would really, you know, go into the story and feel the after effects of the fear, but now it's like, and then there's just, I don't know, completely translucent, no story about it, and so there is no fear in retrospect either. There's no fear in the moment because there's just the action happening. There's just the adrenaline, or however you want to call it, like just the immediacy of that moment. And then generally it's in retrospect that we start to build a story around that and infuse fear into the memory of that experience. But when there's no interest in that either, then, you know, even the simple things, just like being caught off guard and jumping, that too leaves no trace. It's totally seamless from all the rest of it.
Yeah, it leaves no trace, you know. Again, when I was in Colorado, leaving Denver, going up the hill, you know, over to Vail Pass, and it was like a huge blizzard, you know, and I was trying to keep up with the other cars. I had a front-wheel drive car, and I wasn't used to that. Somehow, if you let off on a front-wheel drive car, the front breaks loose. Somehow you have to keep on it a little bit, you know, or somehow it's a balance. I didn't know. So I let off on it, and I did this 360. There was a huge deep ditch on that side. Instead, I went over to this side, and there was a huge snowbank there, and my back of my car bounced in the snowbank, and I just thought, keep going, baby. Don't stop in this snowbank. And then afterwards, I was like, what should I say? I was... You know, I realized that now fear could come in. I could really be afraid because that was, I mean, this is a busy highway. I could have really caused a huge pileup. And instead, I just said, no, I don't need that. Of course, I did slow down, though. I did change my driving habits. Let me change gears here a little and tell you what's been happening with me, and then we'll see where that goes. I think for some time I've had a yearning to hear this teaching in a different language, a little softer language, or somehow a broader language, let's call it. And I got this idea that in order to do that, I needed to have another audience. If I keep going to people that are declared spiritual seekers, that they would somehow elicit a similar languaging, and it couldn't really happen without going somewhere else. And somehow, through a lot of thought about how could I do that, and a little bit of experimentation, an entranceway into a Chicago-based university occurred, which for me is like ideal, just perfect. It couldn't be better. And I got involved with something called the Center for Global Peace Through Commerce, which is part of a business school. And I think the foundation of global peace is always personal peace.
Definitely, yeah, I agree.
So then, this is exactly what I want to do. Couldn't be better. But in a way, I have to look at what's going on in the world too, and be a part of that. And then it's a little softer than the newspaper, because we're talking global peace through commerce, which means like how can a business evolve to be more inclusive. And so we're not really looking at the political piece or the real hardship cases around. And then we can acknowledge them and say that, okay, that's good too. And somebody's got to confront those. There's political organizations that are doing that already, and we wish them the best of luck, but we're really not trying to solve things politically. We're looking for those situations that can work through commerce, or, how business can somehow improve and be more inclusive and more sustainable with the atmosphere, sustainable, with the environment, sustainable with their employees, sustainable with the communities that they're in, and somehow cut a softer wake and less of a footprint on the planet. And I think it's just so beautiful. And then we're going to talk about what makes a business leader, puts him in a position to actually make these decisions. Somehow it's a comfortableness within his own skin.
Definitely, yeah.
And so then I mean, in a way, I'm acknowledging and confronting stories, right? These are the stories of what works and what could work, and probably these are the stories of what doesn't work right now or what could work better. And so then I don't want to really get lost in those stories.
Right, you better be convinced.
I better be centered, I tell you. And how to talk that, like what's already here. I probably won't say it in that way, but, maybe I will. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's very important. Business, like I've thought about this, setting up some kind of course, that, because the problem is, we've got plenty of world leaders, but as long as they're not self-responsible, as long as they're not self-leaders, right, like really being leaders of their own experience, not as in dictating their own experience, I want to feel this, I don't want to feel that, but like having total mastery through that relaxation, through that natural ease that transforms the entire experience, into the entire psychology, into a vessel of benefit. As long as that's not the case, as long as the defending this part and attacking that part is still driving the experience, then no president will ultimately make the right decisions for the greater good, and no business CEO will make that kind of decision. So it's very important that we have accessible language, that we develop accessible language to fit our age, to fit our mind stream, our mindset. That's great. Yeah, definitely go seize the opportunity, or
No,
however.
I've seized it in big time, and even the CEO is malleable in a way because I mean, in a company or in a country, there's a coalition of the willing. There's those people behind that, and we call it consciousness and we call it critical mass and all these things, and it takes place in a company too. People that see that, and then long-term planning. Can see another way to do things. I mean, it's not always so smooth in a company because oftentimes, most all the time, when you really look down the road and see what you're going to need to be doing, in a way, it's destructive to what you're doing now. In a way, it obsoletes your current products. And so then that's like saying, "Oh, rats! We're going to obsolete all our."
Yes.
In all our, especially if we have heavy duty sunk investments in production lines and all that stuff, that can't be transformed into another product. Of course, they can even be divested. Advanced companies do that, and they know that if they just stay with that old stuff, they're just postponing their death.
Yeah.
Just
But
doesn't work
really
anymore.
also
It
what
just doesn't work anymore.
no,
Doesn't work for the
exactly.
planet. Doesn't work for the planet. Doesn't work for humanity. Doesn't
No,
work for the atmosphere. The environment.
exactly. So that's also, you can only do whatever comes your way, and whatever company or organization is at some level willing to receive this, they will contact you or somebody similar, or so then the meeting will happen. So it's not about saving all the companies. That's impossible. So you see I see this increasing on a very conventional relative level. I see a very strong distinction happening between people who are finally willing to let go of their excessive need to secure this, that, etc., and really fight for it. So there's people who more and more naturally become acquainted with this natural presence without them even knowing it. But they are willing, there's a willingness, a readiness. And then and this includes corporate life. So you see the same movement happening within corporate life and organizational structures. So what you see is that the other line is really leading to its self-destruction, and partially helps destruct some of the other aspects, of course, like we all live in an interconnected environment. But what you really see is that this line is dividing ever more because the pace of society and the intensity of our desires nowadays, like and the fears and the insecurity and all of that on a collective level. So ultimately, these organizations that are not willing to look for these opportunities, they will destroy themselves inevitably.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's not that simple because if they just destroy themselves and disappear.
Mm-hmm.
But, whenever there's obsolescence and loss or appearance of loss or radical shifting around, there's a lot of turmoil and it spills over on everybody. And it's kind of like a big event. So then really easing it in all the way around is really important. And of course, this is all a story, see? I mean, we're drilling in on a story now. And it sounds pretty radical sometimes if you say it in certain ways. Global warming and all these kind of things. And, you could even start saying if the water goes up, how many millions and billions of maybe a billion people live on the coast. And they got to migrate somewhere. Now that's called refugees, right? I mean, refugee problems, even small ones of a million people, are hugely exacerbating. They're hard to figure out. And so then you can really drill in this story and start to get this is where fear comes, But actually doing it might not be so fearful. But I mean, like whenever there's shifting and stuff, there's a lot of turmoil. So then, what is it? And we don't want to just tell people, don't, that's only a story. So then
Right.
just stick with what's
Well, that,
already always present. But in a way, we want to say that. I mean, that's kind of like how do we dance that dance?
yes. Language is very, very important. And when we have full conviction in ourselves as freedom, so when we have conviction to the point where for our personal well-being we don't need to defend or define anything anymore, then there's an intelligence that never ceases to amaze itself really in the way it expresses. And it can develop with this intention which naturally arose in you and which has been arising in me in a very similar way. Like we have to have something that fits this age. And there's millions, well, practically everybody, but let's put it this way, there's millions of people that do desire this well-being and that are willing and ready for this well-being, for this natural harmony. But they don't have the circumstances, they don't have the ideas, they don't have the societal circles that allow for this to even be noticed, this kind of teaching. So what you say is also an important point with the spiritual seekers. That's one thing. Spiritual seekers, they will find their way, so to speak. There's plenty of
That's
material out
exactly
there.
it. They're done. They're on the whatever they've got is enough for to ensure that their arrival, whatever that
Mm.
means. But I mean,
Yeah, if the earnest desire is already there, and especially if it's in such a way that it meets with teachings, it meets with the instruction, then inevitably that will result in whatever is desired. So it's important to somehow, I think it's important somehow, that's just story, but it's beautiful, to somehow be forming this language in such a way that my grandmother can understand it, in such a way that a CEO of a profit-focused organization can understand this and actually apply this within his organizational structure. And the key to do that is to never, well, I think, is to never get lost indeed in concept. So it's never about actually telling them what to do or how to do it. It's about purely introducing them to that about them, which is already intelligent and self-beneficial. Because only then will his entire being, his entire expression, be transformed into a vessel of benefit. And only then will he have the power to run a company in a totally new way, without offending everybody, but it's endlessly clever. So there's nothing that isn't possible.
yeah, I love that endlessly clever. Because a lot of times, like we
Mm.
think that it's not all that clever. That we have to stop working for money or something like that, or that we can see on the short term that these companies, if they can't do what they've been doing, it's going to cost money, or they're not going to make money, or their products are going to go obsolete. But of course,
Yeah,
our focus as global peace through commerce means that there'll still be commerce. So commerce means that
right.
sustainability, the first part of sustainability is economic sustainability. It means that we're going to show up tomorrow. We'll still be here. And so in order to do
Yeah,
that, there has to be some leftover money that they call profit. And
yeah,
that is going to engender growth and research and expansion and caring for more people, actually. And so then it's not an either or on that case for sure. And then we don't maybe know that story. We don't know how that's going to work. We don't know how you can uh, make money by feeding the poor or making everybody
no, but
healthy.
it will happen, and that's the beauty of it. Like if this pure intention is here, which is naturally there, and it's not, I don't see it as a personal thing, as not from my experience. I'm not sure how you experience it, but it's not. It doesn't come from a selfless or a self-centered focus, because that's pretty much gone here. So what happens is that there's a natural benefit, and there's no need to deny anything within conventional reality. And even though the wave is seen as water and no longer as its shape, it's endlessly clever in a way that doesn't mean that everything is space, in the sense that you can't see anything anymore. It's it's indescribable, but it's a total marriage of that freedom and of that shining through with still the conventional reality and the engagement therein. And there's a natural benefit that flows from you. Why not? Why would you sit still like a, if that's inspired in that particular experience, that's perfect. But whatever is inspired, often I see that it's inspiring people, when freedom is apparent, to actually engage in endlessly clever ways to integrate within the already existent structure of society in which they are born, seemingly. To integrate that freedom with daily action and to be this radiance and to affect people in such a way without people even having to know about it. The spiritual seeker will know about it. They will come to you. They will digest your material. They will practice. They will commit to it. But those who are totally unaware and totally uninterested to seek in such a form, they can be addressed too. And if that is intention arose in you, and if there's this pure power behind it, this conviction to be of benefit, then there's no failing in that, and you will see results, even though prior to that engagement, to that action, you might think like, oh, how is this going to work? Corporate life is about earning money. It's about destroying trees. It's about, what good will it do for the company? How will that work? And of course, that's just natural doubt arising. That's dualistic thinking. But that's why I say it's endlessly intelligent. Never underestimate the power of being naturally convinced of freedom, of openness. It's endlessly, it's much more intelligent than anything that we can conjure up mentally or intellectually. And if that intention arose in you, then that's a clear sign to me, and what I've experienced in myself and other people, that it will work in that way, regardless of seeming obstacles. If conviction is firm, more and more, then there's no obstacle.
So maybe the difference is this, because a corporation tells a story. A corporation is a story. A corporation will probably always tell a story. You're not going to say for your corporation just to concentrate, just to not concentrate, but open your awareness to what's always present. No, they got a product line and a story, a marketing story and the whole thing. But the people that are behind that corporation and the advisors could be way more centered, and they wouldn't be lost in any story, and then they would see how to tell that story in the very best way, and that would be appropriate, and even for tomorrow and for tomorrow and for tomorrow, even with their stories of projections, that things are going this way, and then they'll say, okay, let's make an appropriate story for that. And then, so then I can see that would be easy way to insert. I think that people are totally interested. When you said, and you said not interested to seek in this manner, but everyone I think is totally interested in how life works better. And the unfortunate part from my point of view, or my story, is that so much of so-called spiritual seeking has got a denial component in it. And people don't want to get into denial. What they're denying is the false, and what they call the falseness of the illusory life, But that denial component is I don't want to have much emphasis on that, because I think that's kind of like that's the stickler that people are not really that interested in.
Yes.
Maybe the intention never was denial, even though with the original sages who posited all this and tried to explain it the first time. Maybe the intention was never denial, but it just seemed like that they threw up the two, like something is always here, always present, and then other things come and go, take your choice. And they didn't even say take your choice, but the way mind works, it's going to take its choice, right? And then that's their denial is kind of built in there.
Yeah, I recognize everything you said. Beautiful. And I think that's a beautiful shift even within this circle of spiritual seekers or teachers and whatever. There seems to be an adjustment happening, an integration into what's called for in this time. So we're not all meditating under a tree like 2,000 years ago for a lifetime. There's ways being developed and languages being developed and intentions arising that allow for this to be applied to whatever is here right now. And so I think that's never to be denied, even if some master said, that's projection. If you know for yourself, if there's total conviction, if there's the recognition of that freedom, just repeatedly where we break that chain, just to ensure that we're not following on some kind of projection, but we just break that chain and we naturally are at ease and we recognize what is clearly here. In that moment, whatever it inspires us, of course, this is a tricky business because immediately it's turned into a story. But when we more and more settle there, when we really have no interest in getting it for ourselves to secure something, then it's utterly clear what has to be done. And we'll do it. And there's no doubt about it. And it will succeed.
What strikes me is you would be tremendously effective in a university setting. You really speak the language. Tell me.
Yeah, I was invited by a school the other day, and this was really my first public meeting. They were Dutch, and they saw one of my YouTube videos, and they recognized that it was shot in Holland. So they searched for me, and they asked if I was to come to their college. They had a group of about 20 people who did philosophy course about how to be more happy in life, etc. So I was invited there, and it's actually interesting because they are not spiritual seekers at all. Well, they are, essentially, of course, but not in that form, like we discussed. So it was very interesting to give my first public talk and just to let the language flow and form spontaneously and intelligently to meet these people at their place, at that location, in that setting. And I think it worked pretty well. So that's it can adapt. It's adaptable to any circumstance, to any mindset. It's never limited to being only for spiritual seekers or a particular language. So we can definitely, there's a lot of growth in this area to develop languages, to develop courses even, to really fit this modern age, this mindset, to really fit the corporate mind. It's possible, it's very much possible, regardless what experiences and ideas somebody has. Everybody can be directly pointed to this from where they are perceiving. Doesn't matter, because what's seen through their eyes is what's seen through my eyes. You can always bring it back to that experience, and you can use endlessly clever ways to formulate it so that it doesn't scare anybody off with a particular mindset, and still introduce them to that experientially. I think that's one of the most important parts of this role that we're playing, you and I here, and other people. So it's great that you're not fooled by the strictly non-dual language or the strictly Advaitic.
Well, maybe I was for a while. It's really interesting that you're into that venue, and stay with it. And I hope to invite you in to our venue, because basically that's what I'm up to. I'm creating this open link, since I'm kind of an expert on an open link, and which is, you could just call it video conferencing. Basically, it's just two-way video, because I can take other people in on Skype and I can do the whole thing out on broadcast, and we can be going all over the world right now. I'm not doing it right in this particular moment, but that's kind of like what I'm offering, and we're calling it Center for Global Peace, or maybe we'll call it Global Peace Through Commerce, Open Source Learning. And I think that's what we named it. We were working on our credo, our statement, yesterday. And so it's, I'll say it again, global peace through commerce, open source learning. And that's what it is kind of like, just to say I would be setting up a video conferencing, hyper video conferencing, and it would be available to every class, and for, guest lectures from all over the world. And we just do it through Skype and just open this university up, just to let every student follow, every group of students follow their interest and instinct, and follow and chase down interests at other universities with their childhood friends who are in university. Make these links. I'm just going to be a link, and I'm not going to really supply content. I'm just going to be the awareness in a way, and that's a huge metaphor, but I just threw it in there. But I mean, and then everything won't be top down. Top down means like now the administration of advanced colleges and universities set up studies abroad and so on like that. But it's very intense. It's very administrative intense and costly. And even now, the dean of our school is in Czechoslovakia setting up studies abroad and programs. He's in Europe for 10 days. Well, that's nice too, but he's not doing other things that he could be doing in those 10 days. I mean, and so they only can do them one at a time, basically. But I mean, just having an open link, I mean, the whole world is connected anyhow, so let's just connect it through a virtual miracle. And then everything will happen simultaneously by itself, just like life flows, just like nature flows. The whole of being is in communication, let's say. Or others will go farther and say it's all one anyhow. There's nothing to communicate even. But I mean, it looks like it.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you would be totally invited in,
Well, thank you. I'll be in California from beginning of March till half of May somewhere.
Yeah.
And are you in that area?
No, we're in Chicago. I don't know when it's really going to take hold, see, because I realized that in universities there's kind of like a loop of energy, like, when the quarter starts and then people are interested in new things and then they start to realize they're behind in their work and they got to study for finals. It kind of goes up and down, and then everyone's closed, and then boom, they're off for vacation. So then what I'm hoping to do this quarter is to model this thing, 4 or 5 times. So everyone knows that, hey, this is second nature. We could always, hey, we'll build this into the curriculum in the fall. And that's probably when it'll really crack off, I would love it if we had a TV studio and we were open 40 hours a week and we were always hooked up with somebody, and some class was using us some way to hook up with the rest of the world, either companies or CEOs or other countries or other universities or experts in the field, authors. I mean, there's so many places. That's what the dream is. And then, of course, I know that everyone else will get all kinds of foundational work, too. We'll find out what is it that makes a peaceful person. And then that can make a peaceful company and a peaceful village and community. So,
very good.
Anyhow, thanks so much for taking this time. Bentinyo.
Yeah, you too. And, yes, Richard.
Yes. I really enjoyed myself with you. You really got a terrific energy, and I know you'd be fabulous in the university.
Yeah, I'd love to go to a university. Yes.
So, everybody, thanks for watching this episode, this connection, and be a part of it. Be a part of it by watching. Be a part of it by being on. You're welcome. And so that's it for today. Bentinyo Massaro. Where are you staying now? Are you in Europe permanently, or are you all over the world?
I'm in England today. I will travel to India tomorrow, Tiruvannamalai, if I pronounce that correctly, for a month. And then I will be in California area, Santa Cruz, San Francisco. Well, I don't know the topography that well, but I will be in California for about 2 months, a little over 2 months, March, April, and part of May. And then I will be in New York and maybe North Carolina for half a month. And that will be my first trip. I have to get back to Holland because of a 90-day permit thingy. So, but I'll continue to travel to the US. That's my feeling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. Enjoy your day.